traditionally, in talking about fiction and the fact that traditionally we have experienced fiction as made over here and experienced over there, that the fiction is created and then it in its medium is transported, and I do it in that medium. Okay, in role playing, we are instead talking about whatever it is that those creators did from when they didn't know how it was going to go to where they did know how it was going to go. Whatever they did, whether it was, flash of insight or whether it was through 10 months of conferencing, I don't care. But however they did that, they did it without the audience around. They knew that the audience isn't looking at it yet. They did it as work, as their thing that they were doing. And instead, if you take that precise moment and you attenuate it through a social interactive procedure among others, and you therefore experience the fiction for the first time, just like the creator of any story experienced it for the first time when they were sure that it was going to go this way. But you do it in front of everybody else, which they never do.
Mm.
And you stretch it out and actually sort of take your time with it, which from that professionalized point of view is the last thing you want to do. You want to bust it out.
Yeah.
This I have found when talking to people from a traditional fiction analysis background, they'll first of all say it's impossible. That can't be done. Second, they'll say that moment of creative whatnot from not having it to having it is ineffable. And everybody has their own idea. Maybe it's, the spirits of the cosmos move you. Maybe it's the collective unconscious. Maybe it's a particular neurosis. Maybe whatever it is. But whatever it is, it's special. And only the people who have it can do it. To demystify that into an enjoyable social creative activity is regarded by them very much like a Victorian moralist would look at a raunchy, fun instance of group sex. It's like you're doing it with a whole bunch of other people and you're doing it out in front of everybody and you're taking your time out. I mean, that's horrible, right? Yeah. You can't do that, right? And so that kind of that relationship to the fiction is really what I'm aiming at and why I consider this to be a medium of its own.
Mm.
Now,
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and so Sorcerer was my means of learning how to do it in a way that was not merely desired as I hope we can pull it off this time, and I'm not sure why we do and why we don't, but actually simply as a given. Of course we're doing this. And one of the most important things about that, too, is that it has to have a potential fail state. Either it's not that great this time as outcome, it's not very interesting or coherent, or potentially you could actually say halfway in the middle, this ain't going well. This isn't working out tonight. Because think of any actual artistic creative activity in which those are not the case, and you won't. They all have that. Right? I mean, you cannot, if you have rules that guarantee that you get the story about the thing, then that's not what I'm talking about. That won't
sure.
So therefore
there's some risk involved. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Therefore we have to have something that has to be touched by human hands and has to be dependent on what people want to do with it, just like any musical instrument.
Have you followed that same model or philosophy in games you've written subsequently?
In different ways. In different ways in two ways. One is obviously with different techniques. That's not surprising. But more importantly, in different ways in terms of what for. Whether this is an act of gleeful abandon or whether this is genuinely radical confrontation, and whether this is working out familiar things, but in a fashion that isn't the familiar way to do them. So, for example, the one of the things I was doing about the same time as I was starting to put Sorcerer together was I wrote my first version of a Rock'em Sock'em fantasy role playing game with spells. And I stuck it in a shirt box and forgot about it. And it was a beautiful fantasy heartbreaker of the classic construction. And so in 2013, I dug it up, 2012, 2013, I dug it up and was somewhat shocked that I remember this. And therefore said, I think there's actually something here, and just started playing it and changing it and playing it and changing it and playing it and changing it until I had finished a new game. And so when I say what for, there are different aesthetic and experiential qualities that are very, very specific for each of the games. But in all of them, the fundamental idea that I did describe, which is that the fiction is generated by us with these instruments, and the instruments have qualities because all instruments have qualities. Now, what do you want to do with it? I mean, first of all, do you want to play with this instrument at all? Second, if you do, now what are you going to do with it? So the range that I've discovered, I mean, you'll laugh at me for this. I mean, I really, really wanted Sorcerer to be done in 1999. I really wanted it done. I scratched this itch. But no, I have, as I like to say, the severe form of the disorder. And therefore, I have to manage its presence rather than,
Yeah, you've got kids hitting you up in 2021 about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Later.
Or as my wife has came to have to realize, is that we can travel to a foreign country, and if I have been so unwise as to let anybody know about this, we may get several chatty people showing up somewhere, and my wife is like, the gamers are here, and I'm like, I know, they called. They emailed me.
Well, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, well, it's got its cool side. I mean, and I love what I'm doing right now with Adepts Play, which is, at the risk of promotion, certainly if you were to go to that channel that says find players and groups and say, looking for some Sorcerer, people from Argentina to Turkey to Finland to Washington State will respond. So,
did you get that name Adept Play from the sorceress notion of the adept, or did that come along later?
Of course,
yeah.
And I had actually learned it as a kid from the classic short story, or actually novella, by Fritz Leiber called Adept's Gambit. And so I encountered the word through, fantasy fiction. And of course, I'm aware of its colloquial use as well. And so the somewhat arrogant notion that I was adept at this, is involved as well. But the interesting thing about Sorcerer as a game was that it broke my own assumptions through the period of designing it, because I was playing the entire time and playing this game and pieces of it and trying it out with different people and stuff like that. And again and again and again, some piece that I considered, some procedural piece that I considered fundamental to play, that a role-playing game had to have this, would crack off and fall apart.
Mm.
Or more basic, there was the day that I've often talked about. I think it is mentioned in the annotations to your copy, where I basically looked at the next session and said, wow, everything that I used to call preparation, I don't have to do. I am actually ready to play. And this isn't an improvisational game where you just have this democratic improvisation all over the place. This is a game where I do have responsibilities to make up and what to do, but to play with outcomes that we are supposed to work toward, to play in such a fashion of, oh, it'll be so cool when this person shows up, but to say instead, we're not thinking like that. I'm going to play this person doing what they're doing, and who and when they show up with, that's subject to certain events during play. They may show up to someone else than I had, if there are reasons for them, or events of play and roles actually land those two together instead. So the notion that you have to sit down, look at everything and say, okay, what's going to happen this time? That's okay for certain things that involve proactivity of your own characters, because you play them. But it's not okay in terms of anything else. And that, when I realized was the case, I said, wow, we're doing that thing that I wanted, and I never dreamed that it would look like this. And I kind of picked up the game and said, what are you, you little bastard? Where did you come from?
As a GM, your prep then is to play the demons, essentially. You're
and lots of other characters too.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Huh. Yeah, that's you're right. That's a radically different way of thinking about.
And you see, I actually learned a great deal of this in that late 80s and early 90s experience playing Champions and other games that had similarities. The early Champions has many qualities which were lost in subsequent use and play and editions and authors. I always really liked those. And a lot of them are present in Sorcerer. The whole idea of each character being a little constellation of relationships is from Champions. The notion of the bonus die, which is completely unconstructed, just really, holy shit! Here, get another die.
Yeah,
just completely unconstructed. There's no table that you consult. That's actually from Champions as well, from 1981.
And that's followed into a lot of different systems.
Which one? The bonus stuff?
Yeah, bonus die, or as kind of. I mean, they call it inspiration die now. If someone does something particularly,
again, there are versions of that have shown up before, but in its particular form, it's pretty traceable to a couple of games that got it from Sorcerer. There's something called Fan Mail and Primetime Adventures and Gift. There's a few. I'm not going to say it all goes straight to Sorcerer, but it's sort of prominence, and it's kind of based on the fun, just based on that you do that. Turning it into a resource is another issue, and that actually goes all the way back to the first game that I know of that actually had sort of an undifferentiated resource for improving dice, and it was totally player side, and it was basically just a resource. Was James Bond 007, long ago. But different forms of that have gone different paths, and some of them have that kind of unconstructed because we're having fun way, and some of them have gone much more of a very constructed way of resource management and stuff like that. So it's kind of a big topic, I guess.
Yeah.
So, but does this sort of give you a little more look at this.
Yeah, as far as an interview goes, that's all I really got for you. Thank you so much
thank you
for
very much.